So as you may have seen, we got a pretty massive reveal at the most recent Diablo 4 developer livestream in that we're getting runes and Runewords with the Vessel of Hatred. And while this system is not exactly like the one from Diablo 2, this system still has a lot of elements that harkens back to those systems, but does it in a much newer way. And whether you want a rune or runeword system exactly like Diablo 2, this system in Diablo 4 is going to add a ridiculous amount of build crafting just because of some of the things you're going to be able to pull off with this system. Now, I think the best thing to do is to go over an overview of how this system is actually going to work. So starting off, to make a rune word, you're going to have to combine two different runes, one being a rune of ritual, one being a rune of invocation. And once you put one of each of these runes in an item that has 2 gem slots, it turns into a rune word, which is then like the completed item. And the reason you need both of these is because each one of these runes does something very different. There's a bunch of different ways to explain how this works. Some people are calling it prefix or suffix. Some people are calling it like a cause and effect, but I think just going over some examples gives you a pretty good idea. So runes of rituals are kind of the starting point. This is how you're going to generate the currency for the system, which is called offerings. And this rune is also going to have the thing you need to do to generate these offerings. So let's take, for instance, the Bach rune. So to generate offering with this rune, you have to travel 5 meters. And once you do that, you will get 50 offering. Now there'll be a bunch of different ritual runes that all have a different objective and will all give you a differing amount of offering. Now offering is going to be used in conjunction with the runes of invocation to cause something to happen. So let's take a look at the Jaw rune. So to cause the Jaw rune to actually trigger, it requires 500 offering. This effect will also have a 2-second cooldown, and what the Jaw rune will actually do is it will replace your next evade with the Sorcerer's teleport ability, blinking further, dealing damage, and becoming unstoppable. That's also a pretty big element of these different runes. Some of them, like this Jaw rune, can actually give every class the ability to use skills from other classes. And the developers did also mention that these abilities will basically be upgraded versions of these skills. So as you can see here, this teleport from the Sorcerer, which can be used on all the other classes, will blink further than normal, will deal damage, and will make you unstoppable. And what's also pretty interesting, and I think a really good design element, is that these aren't giving you like new abilities you have to press, they're interacting in other ways. So with this one, this just turns your next evade into the teleport ability, allowing it to kind of seamlessly fit into your normal playstyle. Now, on top of all of these elements, you can also overflow your runes of invocation, and that will increase the effect of whatever rune you're using. And because every rune of invocation also has different amounts of offerings you need to trigger the effect, that'll also change the amount of offerings you need to overflow the effect. So let's say you have a rune that reduces your cooldowns. Well, if you have more offering than you need for that invocation rune to actually proc its effect, it will overflow that rune and just increase the effect. So if you have a rune that reduces your cooldown and you need, say, 50 offering, if you have 100 offering, it will reduce your cooldowns even more because you overflowed it. And there will be a ton of ritual and invocation runes of all different rarities going up to the legendary rarity. So there will be some pretty ridiculous combinations. And you'll also be able to have 2 rune words at a time. So this also means that 2 of your pieces of gear worth of gems will also be replaced with these rune words. And they're also allowing helms to now have 2 gem slots as well. So if you want to put your rune word into your helmet, you'll also be able to do that. Now there's also going to be some crafting elements tied into the rune word system. So first off, you will be be able to craft other runes with your runes. So if you use 3 of the same rune, it'll roll into a new rune. The crafted rune will always be something different. And when you're using magic and rare runes, there is a chance that it rolls to a higher rarity. And like we went over, you can get legendary runes that are going to be different than the lower rarity runes. So you are able to earn these and then also use them to craft different ones or potentially craft higher rarity ones. But where it gets really interesting is a mythic unique crafting with these runes, because you'll be able to go to the jeweler and craft mythic uniques with your runes. So every mythic unique item will be available to be crafted, and you'll have to use specific runes to craft these different items, and they will also require 1 resplendent spark. So you'll need a handful of specific runes plus a resplendent spark, and then you'll be able to craft yourself a mythic unique. And this isn't replacing the current system where you take 4 resplendent sparks and craft any mythic unique you want. This is just on top of that. This is another way in which you'll have the opportunity to obtain some mythic items. Now, as mentioned, there's going to be a bunch of different runes, some that just give you like resources or reduce your cooldowns or do other more generic effects, and some will allow you to cast skills from other classes. And these are all the current skills we'll be able to cast from the Runeword system. So from the Barbarian, we'll be able to cast Challenging Shout or Warcry. From the Druid, we'll be able to cast Earthen Bulwark or Petrify. Petrify seems kind of crazy. From Necromancer, we'll be able to cast Decrepify or Iron Maiden. From the Rogue, we'll be able to cast Concealment or Dark Shroud. Dark Shroud being another one that seems absolutely crazy. From the Sorcerer, we'll be able to cast Frost Nova and Teleport. And then from the Spiritborn, we'll be able to cast Concussive Stomp and Vortex. Now, on top of the actual skills from those classes, there are also other effects we'll be able to get from these classes. So for instance, on the Barbarian, there's a bunch of different effects they can get that spawn earthquakes. Earthquake isn't an actual skill they cast, but this is a proc they can get from, say, a bunch of legendary powers, and that will be a proc we'll be able to get on one of these rune words. From the Druid, we'll be able to have a Dancing Bolt, which is just another damaging proc from a bunch of effects. From Necromancer, we'll be able to get Desecrated Ground. From Rogues, we'll be able to get Stun Grenades, and from Sorcerer, we'll be able to get Meteorites. So again, these aren't skills specifically from those classes. These are different proc effects from either passives in their skill trees or things like legendary aspects. And also keep in mind, on top of all of this, there's just going to be a bunch of other effects that are just like damage procs or a bunch of other effects that aren't tied to any specific class. And also, just to give a better idea of what you can expect for some of these runes, I just want to go over a few additional examples. And one of the first combinations I saw that I thought could be pretty crazy is using the Pak Ritual rune, which requires you spend 5% of your primary resource, and this will give you 2 offering. So if you can dump all of your resource very quickly, you'll be able to generate a lot of offering very quickly. And then if you combine this with the Zan rune of Invocation, this could have some pretty cool effects. And what this does is your next skill cast will be a guaranteed crit and overpower. This effect only has a 1-second cooldown, but it requires 700 offering. And my first idea with this would be like a pulverized druid. You make a pulverized druid, you don't take any spirit cost reduction effects. Instead, you get spirit generation effects. So anytime you use a pulverized, it uses a lot of spirit. So you dump a lot of your maximum spirit that gives you a bunch of offering with Pak, and then once you build up to 700 offering for Zan, your next pulverize is a guaranteed crit overpower, which is what pulverized druids rely on to do damage. A pulverized druid getting a crit overpower is one-shotting most non-boss enemies on your screen. That's where all of your damage comes in, and being able to guarantee that every certain amount of time would be ridiculously strong. This is is just one possible combination. You could also change out the ritual rune to try to get something that could potentially give you more offering much more quickly. This would also only be one of your rune word combinations. You would also be able to have a second, so you could do something crazy with the other one as well. And then just to give an example of one of those runes of invocation that can be overflowed, we have the rune. This rune will reduce your active cooldowns by 0.25 seconds on a 1 second cooldown, and it only requires 100 offering, but if you overflow this, it further reduces your cooldowns. Now, we don't have information on exactly how much this will further reduce your cooldowns, but because this requires so little offering compared to a lot of other runes of invocation, this could potentially just give you some absurd amounts of cooldown reduction if you have a really good combination with a good ritual rune that can generate you a ton of offering. And these are just some kind of base combinations, because again, we also have all the skills from other classes we can use. We have 2 different rune words we can be using at a time to make some crazy combinations. Also, something that's really interesting is that since we're getting 2 shouts from the barbarian, all other classes can also get berserking from those, so that could be another layer on top of these effects. So I think runes and rune words are just going to add a massive amount of build variety and just much more interesting ways of creating builds. But that's the entirety of the rune word system coming with the Vessel of Hatred, and I for one am very excited about this system. I know it's not exactly how runes or rune words were in Diablo 2, but I think this system has a bunch of the flavor from Diablo 2, but is also a system that actually works and is built for Diablo 4 and built for modern gaming, because I don't think just ripping runes from Diablo 2 would work these days. But that's all I wanted to go over, so thanks for watching.